The second episode in a row with a cold open. Perhaps there's a trend developing here. Welcome back to the Vital Point podcast. At the beginning of this season, I shared about how I feel like my personal season that I'm in is enveloped by the Phoenix archetype, this energy of dying and being reborn from the ashes of your own death. And so, in that spirit, keeping with that energy, I have a few announcements before we jump into today's episode, which is a conversation that I had about a year ago with my mom. And it's a really tender, heartfelt conversation about our relationship and our spiritual growth. And it took me a while to get it out for a couple of reasons. One was this sort of feeling a little bit scared to put this out, since it was a little bit different than the other podcasts that I have done previously. And so, keeping with that Phoenix energy, we're going to listen to that today, right? Also, I wanted to mention that there are some really cool things happening over in the school.com/Blue Magic Alchemy community. Please go and sign up there now. It's free to join. There's a paid option to unlock more content and live calls, but I think that there's something for everyone there as far as spiritual emergence and your personal transformation. So, in a couple weeks, I'm going to be starting the Path of Meditation, a 30-day course on meditation and microdosing that I've been working on getting out into the world for a couple of years. And so Phoenix energy, here it comes. We're starting that April 3rd. Also, there's a new feature launching on the 19th of March, which is the guest portal, where I bring in facilitators and teachers to lead sessions that complement the core practices that we do in the community of breathwork and meditation, somatics, and psychedelic integration, spiritual growth. So the first session is going to be a morning flow yoga session with my friend and past podcast guest, Jonathan Quest Brown. That will be live for everyone and available to the paid members as a recording. And we'll keep adding things like that as we go. Also, the day after that, on the 20th, we're going to do a special breathwork for transformation session for the spring equinox. Those sessions are never recorded, but it is going to be open to anyone that is a member of the community. So head over to school.com/Blue Magic Alchemy, and you will be able to have access to all of that, plus a bunch of recorded breathwork and meditation, some workshops that are on there, other practices, other sessions. It's a really cool place. So hope you can join us there, and hope you enjoy this episode. Cheers.
When it comes to self-development, no matter the method you use, the vital point is to practice. If you're ready to transform your life and claim the potential inside of you, then you're in the right place. Welcome back to the Vital Point podcast. I'm your host, Jonathan Schecter. As an integrative specialist and breathwork facilitator, I'm invested in making the dynamic landscape of personal evolution accessible. My goal is to inspire you to take action for yourself. You have the capacity to evolve and bring your intentions and dreams into the world, and there's never been more access to so many incredible modalities that can help you on your journey. This podcast will help you learn simple methods you can use to transform your life and share the stories of practitioners who are doing the work so that you feel inspired to go and practice, because that's the vital point. And what a special episode this is. A few firsts here. First of all, this is the first episode that I've done outside of my home studio, which is nice. Get a chance to use some new toys and venture out. And I would say the most important special thing that we've got going on in this episode is my guest, my mother, Roberta Zohara. So first of all, before we get into anything else, welcome to the podcast.
Well, thank you.
Yeah. So I'm just going to be very upfront here for the audience that I am fully sort of fanboying out on Duncan Trussell for the idea for this. I love Duncan. I love his podcast, and I love the Midnight Gospel, where he had an episode that featured the podcast that he did with his mom. And it was a very emotional episode, a very emotional interview, and definitely inspiring to me. So my mom is here visiting in Arizona from her home. I haven't gotten to see her in the flesh in, like a year and a half. And we're just wrapping up about a week long visit where we've had some really good time together. So we just decided to roll the dice and see how a podcast would turn out. So I'm really happy that you decided to take me up on this one.
Well, I don't know if it's my curiosity or my ego or all of the above.
Yeah.
I'm getting to watch you and see how the sausage gets made, so to speak.
Yeah. Well, and that's the thing. We were talking about that before we hit record, right? It's just try to forget that there's microphones and, usually we're recording on video. We decided to skip that. So as a way to begin, I wanted to share a story with you, and then we can kind of get into it more. During 2020, I had this opportunity with my partner. She had suggested that we do a mushroom ceremony, and that I should be the one to lead it, which kind of threw me off a little bit. I wasn't really sure about that whole scene, but I thought, okay, well, let's try it out. And you are so wonderful at sending little boxes of things, different articles or, newspaper clippings that you think I would be interested in, or, different sort of assorted things. And I don't even know how earlier this box had arrived, but I remember that there was something in there that I was expecting. And then as I was pulling out other stuff in the box, there were these different, articles and whatnot. And one of them was a article from Christine Day, this Pleiadian message. And I remember I had looked at it as I was taking the rest of the stuff out. And, like I said, that wasn't what I was expecting to get. So it had ended up on my kitchen table. And I want to say it had probably been there for a month or so, just, sort of sitting in this pile of things. And as I'm getting ready for this ceremony, I thought, well, I should clean the house. And I'm cleaning up. And as I'm cleaning up, I came across this article that you had sent. And I'm looking at it. I'm like actually reading it now for the first time. And I'm looking at it. I'm like, gosh, this seems like this could be good to use in the ceremony. It seemed like it fit. I wasn't sure why. It was kind of prophetic and like very direct about sort of stepping into your power and your destiny. And I don't remember the exact words, but I remember just thinking, I wonder if this would be good for the ceremony. And I took it off the table and kind of set it in another pile of things I was kind of getting ready for the ceremony. And then we opened the ceremony, and I said, hey, I'm not sure if this is, is this okay? Because we're just kind of improvising at this point. But I want to read something. And I started to read it. And I just remember looking at her and her eyes were just really, really wide. And in that moment, like there was something happening energetically. And when I got done, she kind of looked at me and was like, what was that? And I said, my mom sent it to me. And that was, I think, even more poignant. She was like, your mom sent that to you. Wow. Like, your mom is awesome. And so that was half of it. And then I decided to read like the other half, maybe an hour or two after the medicine had kicked in. And that got even weirder because like I kept like, I was pausing and looking at Sarai and going, is this all like, is this just happening to me? And she's like, no. And it was like, there was like a vortex that had opened up in the house. And these words on the page were speaking directly to both of us. And, you know, I remember afterwards in the aftermath, and talking about the experience and the ceremony, one of the things that we kept coming back to was, wow, that thing that your mom sent was really cool. And like, it perfectly fit. I don't think that either of us were expecting that. I don't think at that point that I knew what Pleiadian was. So it was just kind of a random thing for me, but it also fit with, I think, a theme of that ceremony, which was all these different things that I had. It wasn't like I went out to a store and said, well, I need this and I need that and I need the other. And these are all my accoutrements that I'm going to have for the ceremony. It was, oh, this is why I have this. And this is why I've kept this. And all of a sudden finding the use for it, all of a sudden these things having a purpose and a life in the context of this energetic ceremony. So all that is to say, first of all, thank you for sending that. And as, you know, maybe an intro into, I'm really curious to hear about your journey with the Pleiadian energies and the work that you're doing through that. And just to learn more about it, because again, it's something that I don't know a lot about other than listening to you talk about the transformations that you've been going through and the work that you've done and some of the similarities to other things that I do, and going, oh, okay, I kind of understand this contextually, but I'd love to know more. So how did you find the Pleiadian or Christine Day, if that was your introduction to it to begin with?
Yeah, that in some of those lovely little throwaway newsletter pamphlets that you can get at a natural food store.
Right.
She had been writing a column, and it was usually like a page and a half to 2 pages, where she would start talking about a particular theme that she felt was important for that moment in time. And she might touch into how that connected to something that was going on politically, globally, but she was always bringing it back to the personal. And it was always so profound. It was, to me, reading them. I could read them over and over again and get something different each time, as if I'd read it the first time. And in each of those messages, she would write as herself in the first person, and then she would write it, channeling the message from the Pleiadians, which usually would start, beloved ones. And I always found myself so intensely moved because there was so much wisdom for what was happening now and what she would be saying. And there was so much love and compassion in what the Pleiadians were voicing. And I just found myself thinking, that's really intriguing. And at some point when I had been reading those for a while, Okay. I came across an Ancient Aliens program that was talking about the different cultures of the world who have had the mythology and the art and have said very honestly and plainly and simply, our ancestors didn't come from here, they came from the stars. And if you look at this in a global way, there's so many different places around the world where they are connected to different constellations, but there are specific ones that are connected to the Pleiadians. And the minute that I heard that, it's like this, clash of, science and archaeology and exploring ancient history and exploring ancient myths with something that I was doing and had been reading and had been pondering and appreciating for a long time. And I just then kind of went through a little mental exercise for a while because it was very exciting. But then I went through this little mental exercise about how do I feel about hearing that someone is channeling? Do I believe that? What does that mean? And the only way that I could relate to it is as someone who's been a writer my entire life, I know what it means to channel. I know what it means to, have a dream where you keep waking up over and over with two words that you're saying or that are being said to you and being channeled through you, and then just getting up and putting a pen in your hand and just starting to write, and you're thinking, oh, I don't know where that came from. I've had plenty of experience with people when I'm in very deep conversations with them where I literally stop myself and say, I'm going to say something, and I don't know why I'm saying this to you. And I proceed to go on for a while, and then I come to a stopping point, and usually the other person is staring at me, and I say, does any of that make any sense? Because I'm not sure I know what I just said. So from that perspective, I could relate to channeling. So around the same time that I sent the message to you, and I think it's an interesting sidebar to say that in 2020, you and I were both experiencing ending a marriage. Mm-hmm. In fact, I love my joke to you, which was, geez, if we'd have known sooner that this was going to happen, maybe we could have gotten the same attorney and had a group discount. And the marriage for me was it was over in the summer of 2019, but the logistics were such that I was still in the same building as my then really ex-partner. And I was really feeling this profound sense of wanting to let go of these decades of my life in a very high way and be able to process the grief in a way that honored the truth of it and also was not blaming or assuming all responsibility for myself. And I felt like the spiritual practices and the psychological practices and so on that I've done for years were all helpful, but I also felt like, well, this is a whole new energy because I'm stepping into a whole new part of my life. I mean, I didn't expect to, I didn't know, I don't have a roadmap, and it would be really wonderful if I could. And so I was sort of casting around thinking, can I find a group of, women of a certain age who are, unexpectedly lost their partner from divorce or death or whichever. And at that point of feeling like I need a new guide for a new way, there was an ad in the paper that said Christine Day was having a Pleiadian seminar, a 3-day weekend in the Twin Cities. And immediately I was just like, yep, I'm going to go. And then, the self-doubt started creeping in of, oh my God, all I've been doing is reading her stuff in the newspaper. What do I know about the Pleiadians? Maybe are there prerequisites, like coursework that you do in college? Because it kind of felt like that. And I contacted them and asked them questions, and they went, no. And I went, okay. And they said, if you still have more questions, here's some stuff on her website. And I hadn't even realized that she had a website. I had just been reading this in the throwaways. And I immediately felt so both at home and pulled forward is the only way that I can express the energy, and really excited and really honored, and really had a sense when I went there that this was a ceremony, and that there was an initiation kind of process that was going on. And it was really wonderful, because not only was it coinciding with the end of the marriage, but it was just as we were just hearing the news about COVID. And she made some very prophetic statements about something huge that was going to be happening, and that it was a way of the word I want you to say it is called, but that sounds terrible. It was a way of kind of separating people who were willing to accept life and evolve and look at life not just from their own perspective and not just from a global perspective, but to have a sense of a cosmic connection versus people who were not. And it was like those who are going to be left behind. They're going to be like, it's really going to be clear. The division is going to be clear. And it's going to become more like I want to say classes, but it has nothing to do with finances. It has to do with people who are working on their own spiritual and psychological growth, their metaphysical growth, not connected to going to a church, versus those who are not. Those who have a certain definition of reality as everything that we see around us, and therefore I have to live in scarcity and fear, mostly fear, and dread, versus people who are saying, yeah, I see that that's one definition of what's going on, but I believe that there's other meanings behind it, and I believe that there's other things that I'm meant to do with it, and I believe that there's other ways for us to find solutions for it. And I also just believe I'm not going to live in fear, because this is not the end. And I felt like it was something that I could really connect to things that you had talked about with me, and that I read a little bit to try to understand more about you when you went through your decision with Buddhism. It really just made me think about, like, here's a way to walk my life in the world, understanding no death, no fear, and the importance of detachment, the importance of really defining what I mean when I say this is reality. And so that was in 2019. And then, I've continued to, Christine moved to Australia. And so she began to do a lot of things distance, and which was perfect. It had to happen anyway with COVID. And I kind of like slid away from it. I was going, I was reading regularly and dropping into the website and doing my own individual practice, but there were several opportunities to do more seminars, and I wasn't particularly drawn to it. I was sliding into some other stuff, the neuroacoustic programming and working with my own nervous system with functional neurology. And then there was an opportunity for me to do this again, only this time it was by Zoom. And this time when I saw it, it was just like, again, yep, I'm being called. It just really was that feeling of here's a hand reaching out going, yep, it's time. It's time for you to hear this. And the most recent one was really profound in the sense of it talking and teaching very specific techniques that were about first of all, working to upgrade the mind and the body on 6 different levels to be able to accept a different kind of energy, a higher kind of energy coming through cosmic. Second, to understand what that meant for me accepting power and the ability to manifest what I want. Third, to understand the way to reach out and have partnership with the different communities of like-minded people around the world. And then third, the invitation, the door is open with no feeling of coercion or expectation, but the door is open of, yes, you can do this completely for yourself and what you want in your life and your heart's desires. And you can think about making your immediate environment world a better place. The door is open for you to reach through and think about becoming a conduit for energy that can be given to us to really heal the planet globally in terms of peace, which is a big thing in my life. It's been very profound. It's been very. It's ranged from the silly to the absolutely. I want a hippopotamus for Christmas. That silly. To really feeling calmer. I mean, I know that there's been for one thing, there's been a profound peace that's come over me because I've always been a news junkie. And in recent times, it's been pretty hard for me to be able to watch the news and not get emotionally upset, sit and cry, go off and have, the rest of my evening ruined or the rest of my morning ruined. And I've talked a lot with people, and it's so interesting because people have the solution of, well, I just quit watching the news. And I'm thinking, well, then you're stupid. I mean, I'm not going to do that. You need to know this too. You live in this. You are a spiritual being in a physical world, and you need to know what's going on around you. I mean, if you don't know that it's going to rain, you're going to get wet. Instead of taking an umbrella, just let's be prepared. But to come from a sense of anger, and for me, the fear was the way fear would express itself was this depression, this despair almost of, I'm just one person, what can I do? And it just like flipped that on its head to, no, I'm not just one person. I'm like a cell in a huge, infinite cosmic body that joined together, we have this incredible energy. And it isn't anymore in the sense of the aliens, the Pleiadians, the somebody is going to come out of the sky with a magic answer of how we're going to fix climate change and bring world peace. And bring a financial equality and bring gender equality and all of these things. It's, no, I'm the one I've been waiting for. And so are you, and so are you, and so are you. And when we put all of those I ams together, it's an explosive amount of power. So that's how that is for me.
So how do you balance those two things? Because both of those things are true, right? Like we are one of millions, if not billions, right? And we are also this individual spark, this unique spirit, and there's no other you, right? There's no other me. And both of those things are true, and both of those things are part of being a human being, and part of, I think, living in a way that is, I guess we could call it awake, spiritually active, right? So how do you balance those things? Because I guess where I'm coming from is, I see people, and including myself, I've gone through this phase as well, where you swing to one side of this truth that, both sides of the coin, right, are true. But when we choose to ignore one, or we're focusing too much on one particular axis of this truth, things can get a little wonky, right? Things can get a little unbalanced or ungrounded. So, it's like, I'm often thinking, there's, within sort of the personal development community, whether it's with psychedelics or breath work, trauma work, whatever, there are people that very, very much focus on, say, like the love and light, and that everything, this truth that we are these spiritual beings having this human experience. And yet I've also seen people kind of stumble when they come across the human aspect, the fact that there is pain and suffering and things in the world that are ugly and that are hard to swallow and hard to sit with. And on the other hand, if you just focus on that side of things, you could completely get lost, right? Because that is never ending.
You're paralyzed by despair.
Right,
So
right.
a lot of what happens. Well, I mean, the thing of it is that's not, that's not a new concept. That, hey, guess what? You have to take care of both. I mean, after the ecstasy, the dirty laundry. In Judaism, the tradition that you keep two notes, one in each pocket. And one says, I am but dust and ashes. And the other one says, for my sake was the world created. And I think that it's just like any other balance, when you realize that you've been sitting in a way that you're leaning to one side and it's putting a stress on your lower back, and you have to suddenly make a very firm conscious effort of, I have to keep checking in. I have to keep checking in. And I think that it's exactly the same in all spiritual practices, is I have to keep checking in. How did I do with that today? Gee, I feel like I did, really good in this and this and this part of my practice. I'm reflecting back to a conversation that I had with so-and-so. And I think I have to go back and revisit it, because I think I might just have been kind of an asshole and come off like I was a know-it-all and not listened to the pain and the uncertainty that was underlying the question that she asked me. Instead, I just went off into a whole tangent about me. And I think I need to go back to that and say, I owe you an apology. Can we talk about that a little more? I don't think I was very sensitive there. I don't think I was hearing what's going on with you. And to become, both more accepting of my own flaws, more compassionate about other people's, more compassionate about my own, but also to have a humility about, yes, I truly think there's a mission that I have, and that's the life's work, is to discover what the mission is and how to best accomplish it. And it's not something, like, okay, now I've found this practice or this prayer modality or whatever, this way of relating to my partner. It keeps spiraling and evolving and accreting in this really beautiful mosaic. I mean, I guess in a way, son, the thing that I would say is I learned a long time ago, and I've like engraved it somewhere across in the inside of my eyelids, is I really love being able to transcend. When I'm facing a problem, oh man, do I want to transcend as fast as possible and get to the spiritual way of doing it and being it and saying it, because that looks so good and it makes me feel so good about myself and look at me. And then there's going to come that moment where I pull the rug or somebody else pulls the rug right out from under me, and I'm standing there realizing I never transcended it. I just knew a new set of vocabulary. And I've got to go back and do the hard, nasty, grubby work minute by minute to transform it, because until I've transformed it, I can't transcend it.
Yeah, thank you for that. The other thing that came up for me that I was curious about when you're with your initial share was the initiatory aspect of it.
Yeah.
And, I think I agree with you that we both went through something similar in our own way, where the ending of a marriage, and both of us, fairly long periods, right? Like these weren't like flash in the pan marriages, but that event, which was full of sadness and tragedy and grief and not pleasant, not like something that I wanted to go through, but that it led me into this new path or these new practices. For me, it's been a new career, a new partner. For you, you're mentioning, the new practices that you're doing and the healing work that you're doing around it. So I think from one perspective, I'm interested in just talking about the initiation aspect and the fact that sometimes we are, it's something that we're called to, that we see, like you saw the okay, I want to go and do this. Mm-hmm. And then other times, like you said, you're almost being pulled into it, or maybe you're in the middle of something and you realize, I can't get out of this. This is an initiation. It's almost like you're looking back at it in hindsight and going, oh, wait, this was the initiation. It's not the one that I asked for, but it's the one that I needed. So I'm curious, just, what that brings up in you.
Well, the thing that it brought up for me that has been so, it's been fun and it's been profound. I turned 73, as you know, in the fall. And the thing that has been so interesting for me is realizing this is not a new path. And this is not the first initiation. This is like a deepening of, like the first initiation that I can really call an initiation, because that was the word that was used, was in the 70s, before you were born. I belonged to a metaphysical study at home group. They had a physical presence in Southern California. And I went to their, this one, weekend that they had. And the group was called Astara. And one of the things that they did towards the end of the weekend was they said, they asked people to write down things that they wanted to get rid of from themselves, their behavior. And they walked around, we wrote it down, and they put all the pieces of paper, and they set them on fire. And it was just like watching this go up in smoke and looking around and thinking about my smoke, my things I'm working on, and that of all these different people in the room. It was extremely moving. And then the next part of the ceremony was they had, well, we stood, and they had asked us again to write, like, what is your desire when you think of the highest thing you want from your spiritual practice and your spiritual life? And I had the honest to God temerity to write, I want to live in absolute truth. And I don't know why I wasn't struck down by lightning at that moment, because I was so far in my daily behavior from living in any kind of truth. My practice, my actions, like completely separated from what I wanted. And that at that moment, all I knew was, I know what I want. I wrote it on a piece of paper. I held it in my right hand. And the woman who was leading this, her name was Erlene, she came to each person and she said, while you're holding it and you're thinking it, I want you to keep your mind focused on that intention. And she had an assistant with her who had this bowl full of small crystals. They were all, extremely different as crystals are. And she placed it on the third eye, and some people literally passed out. And I know I staggered. And then they put that crystal into my other hand. I still have the piece of paper. I still have the crystal. I hold that crystal every single day. And after my experience the first time with Christine, I had this beautiful image of standing on part of my individual evolutionary spiral and going, it's not, oh, Judaism is better than Catholicism. All of this is better than having been part of Astara, going through therapy. No, going through that kind of therapy. No, it's all this, it's all fed and evolved who I am and how I'm seeing and how I'm working in my life. There's no conflict with it. And it's that beautiful sense of we're all climbing the mountain, and there's so many different paths. And as long as I'm focusing on what's sincere for me, and I think being able to keep a very open heart about what's happening. And I think that being a mother has really helped me with that, because I had to let go of the preconceived ideas that I had of, I know how I don't want my children to turn out, and I know how I don't want to be a mother. I know what my goals are for being a mother. And then watching each and every one of the three of you who are such amazing, unique, and very different, not just from me, but from each other, people. And the paths that each of you has gone on. And I'm just so profoundly grateful that with a few very difficult exceptions, I didn't say, no, I can't follow you down that path. Or, I can't talk to you. Okay, here's my favorite example, is when someone said to me, I said to someone that you had gone to Tibet, and they were totally stunned and astonished. What is a nice Jewish boy doing going to Tibet? And I said, he's learning and meditating and practicing in Buddhism. And they said, oh, you must be so chagrined and so disappointed after everything that you did to make sure that, he went to Hebrew school and he had his bar mitzvah and keeping a good Jewish home. And I said, whoa, wait a minute. All I ever prayed was that he and the other two, each of them, are going to find their connection to God, whatever that is, whatever that looks like. I didn't say, God, keep Jonathan alive so that he can come back and rediscover his Judaism and become a good Jewish man. I said, God, keep him alive and let him feel your presence in his life, in his way. And so I've learned a lot from all the spiritual experiences and practices that each of the three of you have gone on.
I like the concept of the spiral that you've come back to a couple times, and also just to acknowledge that these experiences that we have, especially the big ones, the big transformational ones, the initiations, the peak experiences, aren't separate from our lives as a whole. Mm-mm. And it's not a linear type of a thing. And I see that in the integration work that I do. It's like somebody might go to Peru, for instance, and, sit with ayahuasca, and then, they've got 1, 2, 3, hopefully, integration sessions, and then that's it. It's not like you're checking in with those people for the rest of your life, mm-hmm. even though that experience is continuing to unfold, possibly for the rest of your life. Or there's, there are things that will show up in my experiences that give a new light or a new dimension to something that happened years ago, or in the ceremony that I had last week. Yeah. It's not a linear progression by any stretch of the imagination. And I also like that spiral. I think the first time it came up for me was my partner was doing some sort of massage and like Reiki on me. And I had this vision of this spiral of me's, and me at different ages, different time periods. It wasn't a flat spiral. It was 3-dimensional. And so within that, the different avatars or versions, or whatever you want to call them, could connect to one another in these different ways, depending on how the image was sort of spinning. And one of the things that came out of that, because it started to come up multiple times, was, especially like within the psychedelic community, people will talk about angels or spirit guides, these different energetic entities that you might have an encounter with. And what started to happen to me was, instead of viewing these visitors as outside entities, and certainly there have been outside entities that have come in, but what started to become much more clearer to me was that these were other versions of myself from different planes of existence, or different realities, different timelines, different times in the future. Almost like a future version of me was coming back to like help put that next step down, or kind of show me the way in.
Or okay, something that I thought about recently is like, we talk about the appendix being an unnecessary organ. We talk about the wisdom teeth. People don't really need that because our diets have changed, our jaw sizes have changed, and so on. So they're called vestigial by the strictly scientific community. How about that? They've had a purpose. They might in the future have a purpose. We don't know what the purpose is. I think of that as aspects of myself, because there are times when that answer comes up, and yes, I turn around and I say, thank you, thank you. I really appreciate it. Whoa, hadn't thought about that. Or I'm having difficulty with this, hey, I'm having a struggle with this. If you could help enlighten me. And I go back in, doing what I'm doing, and all of a sudden it floats up to the surface. I think it's a combination of almost like the kiss of the angel that is your past and future self that's inside, that you're not, that I'm not, walking around always being totally aware of. And it's much easier from the cultural Western perspective, and from the cultural and scientific Western perspective, to think of it as, oh, it's coming from outside. And this was the wonderful thing that I kept hearing Christine Day say this last time, which is, it's like the keys are inside of you, where the Pleiadians are giving you the tools to help turn on and expand your ability of energy to accept that it's coming from inside you. It's like you didn't. That's all I can say about that.
Yeah. I mean, that's very. I feel like that's aligned with Buddhism as well. Even within, like, say, Tibetan Buddhism, where there's so much focus on these different deities and different, these different beings, these different Buddhas. And they all look different, and they're different colors, and they have different, numbers of arms, and all these adornments and all these things. Really, that's just a reflection of that same energy that exists within you.
Yeah.
And even looking at, like within Tibetan Buddhism, for specifically, there's so much emphasis on the relationship that you have with your teacher, because the Buddha isn't going to show up. The Buddha, you can read it, you can read his words in a book, but the guru, the teacher, is the one that's actually introducing you to this in this dimension, right? It's this concrete example. But even that is only there until you understand that it's the real guru is within you. It's your own mind. That other being is reflecting your own being back to you until you get it yourself. It's there as a reminder and a reflection until you wake up yourself and go, oh, wait, that's been me the whole time.
When you're talking about balance, the thing that I find a lot of work coming up, and it seems like it's very natural, but it's very emotional for me. It is the balance between the profound the word is the sense of reverence and awe, and it's almost immediately moved and maybe shoved a little by this sense of humility. And at this point, it's not humility of, oh, I can't do this, I don't know how, or I'm really not worthy. It's because to me that's associated with a lot of early Christian upbringing guilt. How dare you, sort of thing. You were born with original sin. This humility, the awe is gratitude. Just so much gratitude for helping me to see this and feel this at this moment in time, and be able to apply this thought to this moment, to this action. And the humility is, thank you for preparing me and helping me to understand that you're giving me this, the strength, you, the eternal you that is me. I, in my personality at this moment, may not know how to do this particular thing. I, who am an eternal being connected to one and connected to all the other ones, I do know. I can stop resisting the idea that I can tap into that eternal source, because I am part of that eternal source. Just like there's a drop in the ocean. I'm not the whole ocean.
Right. Yeah.
Well, you want to say something about how good it's been to have vacation together?
Yeah, it has been great.
Sorry, didn't mean to derail you there.
No, it's okay. I mean, I think I was curious to maybe get your perspective on how, like, what it's like to. This sounds so like egotistical to say it this way, but what's it like to be my mom? Like, what's it like to see the changes that have gone on? I mean, I only have, memory of, a certain from a certain point on, right? Like you have memory before that. And certainly you have your own experience and perspective of some of the things that, that I went through. But I was thinking about that there's, I guess in our family, definitely not between you and I, there's never been a shying away from the transpersonal and the mystical. And it's never like, well, hold on, like there's, some people look at that and they see psychosis, or they see something like that needs to have a more rational explanation. And I think you and I have always been kind of on the same page about like, nope, this is just the way it is. This is what I experienced. And it doesn't really matter if you don't understand it or you don't believe it, because I was there.
What is it like to be your mom? Well, see, like, it's like at what point, on which day, in which year, because, I think that this is something that as a son might be a little odder for you to think about, but my perspective on it is, just as you are changing and growing and going through these processes, guess what? So am I. And I think a lot of times as a parent, I did feel like my kids didn't understand that. And then I just kind of laughed at myself and said, don't be so egotistical. It's not their job to understand it. It's just your job to do it. What has it been like to be, wow. It's always been an interesting adventure because very quickly understood. I think, well, I'll go back to like when you first opened your eyes and looked at me, that first instant when you just looked at me and you had the look on your face of someone who absolutely knew who I was and was seeing right through me and into me. And like, if you could have talked, you would have said, oh, that's what you look like this time. And understanding and being like brought up short over and over again of, yes, I'm having to teach you things like eating with a spoon and tying your shoes and how to pronounce certain words just because you don't have the vocabulary yet to express what you're feeling and what you're thinking does not mean that you're a tabula rasa, that you came very, very well formed. I don't know why, but I just want to say this funny story from when you were really small. And you came out of the bathroom. At the time, we had a bathroom that had a tile floor that was paisley. And you came out and you were very excited and you said, Mom, have you ever really looked at the bathroom floor? And I said, yeah, why? And you said, well, the designs in it are, and I just like went into mom mode. And I said, yes, dear, that's called paisley. And you said, oh, and you pulled my hand and you said, because here's a star and here's a cloud. And this looks kind of like a horse, doesn't it? And I just stood there like, am I dumb? I'm just giving you the word and you're looking and with the eyes of the artist who's just, the artist child who's discovering these things. And it kind of was like that over and over again. And I always felt like you were sort of really sent from the future. And I've said it over and over. I don't know how long it's taken you or if you still believe me or ever have believed me. But I've said, thank you for coming to be my son because you've taught me so much. And you continue to teach me so much. And at this point, particularly in this last 2 to 3, 4 years, I'd say, I really enjoy exchanging metaphysical, spiritual concepts. And at the same time, we can talk about, the mundane things that are annoying us and try to analyze why certain people are doing the things that we're doing and then why we're doing the things that we're doing. And then we can just go take a walk and eat good food and have fun. And that's been wonderful. And it's wonderful for me to watch you not settle into, I think you could have been, because you were, and you were off on the path to be a very successful, I'll just say corporate type of person. You had, great career, very much on the scientific, intellectual understanding, grasping, being able to learn things very quickly, teach yourself things very quickly. I really admired that. Very feet on the ground and very practical and very planning. And then, there came that moment where you just said, yeah, I know I can do all that. I'm doing all that. It's not what I want to do with my life. And it's like my goals beyond was the song I heard singing in the background when you were saying that. And I thought, where is this going to go? How interesting. So as your mom, I pretty much wake up every day and say my prayers and ask blessings and protection upon you. And after I'm done with all of that and I'm going about the rest of my day, it's like, wonder how he's doing today. Wonder what he's doing today. What surprising new things is he going to do today?
I mean, I agree in terms of sometimes I sit back, like we'll talk on the phone and then I'll kind of get off and be like, did that just happen? Like, we just talked about that? Like, that's, and then I sort of, like, sometimes I'll project myself back into the past and be like, could you have imagined that this is what you were going to be talking about, or this is the relationship that you would have? No, not at all.
No. And you know, I do want to say and be very upfront about saying that we went through an extremely difficult period of time during which I really thought that you probably were never going to talk to me again. And my prayer at that point was, okay, God, it's not about me. Just let him stay alive and let him find his way to you and let him feel you in his life. Keep him alive, because as long as he's alive, I know that you are going to be working to reach him. It's not about me. And so, no, if you had said this to me at those points, I would have said, wow, really? And I guess want to throw the question back at you and say, well, what is it like to be my son?
Yeah. I mean, what comes up for me is, in relation to this is that both of us have cleared a lot of unresolved at the time pain, trauma, things that were holding us back, and not in an active way, not in a like, I get up in the morning and I have to put, there's this weight on my shoulders, not consciously, but it was there. And I think that's been something that's been like really alive to me in the last maybe 6 months, especially, is that part of what we call quote unquote healing or the inner work is being able to decouple the meaning that we have around certain events in our life, and say, well, hold on, is that the only thing that was there? Or because I'm focusing on this one particular meaning or this one perspective of this memory, it's keeping me from appreciating or experiencing any other aspect of it. Like I'm just hyper focusing on this one particular meaning, to this memory or to this story. But are there other things that were here? Like I remember, I'm going to answer this in a long way. But I remember being when I was doing the neurodynamic breathwork training, and we were doing all this inner child fractal psychology work. And every week it would seem like somebody would get triggered by the work. And at first I had almost like this hubris about it, like sort of like, well, these people must not have been doing their work, because how could you get triggered by this stuff? And sort of like feeling above them. And then I remember the day that I got triggered, and it was the assignment was to write a letter of gratitude, of saying thank you to your parents for everything that they've done for you, because you owe them your life. They could have left you in a dumpster somewhere. Nobody said, hey, you have to take care of this helpless being that can't wipe their own ass or feed themselves or take care. Like, you were born completely helpless. And it's only by the love and compassion of at least one, hopefully two people, that you're sitting here. And think of all the things that they sacrificed for you and all the things that they did for you that you in your entitlement feel like, well, of course they had to do that.
And they could have done it way better.
Right, exactly. I didn't get my needs met, therefore they didn't do a good job, or they failed, or I have a chip on my shoulder that I can, wear around and use, to continue being a victim in my own life. But set all that aside and just be grateful for everything that they've given you and the fact that they made a choice and they didn't have to make that choice. And I remember freaking out and being like, fuck that. No. I have a right to my anger. I have a right to be upset at the things that didn't go the way that I wanted and the things that I'm still, working through and especially from that time that we're talking about where, things were much more tumultuous, where I went from not talking to one parent to not talking to the other parent, and then flip-flop, I guess, a couple of times back and forth there. So yeah, there's the awe that I feel now, looking back, juxtaposing those experiences with where we are now. I am incredibly proud of you. I think you have come so far in your own growth and your own journey. And it sometimes I have to remind myself when I start to think back on this, that during that time, there were so many things in your past that you hadn't really begun to unpack and understand and heal. Right. And that thing that you were talking about of the kids see their parents as infallible and going, oh, hold on a second. They're just people. I thought you had everything figured out at some point, I think when that first hit me was when we were in Sedona together and we were having that conversation, and you were telling me about how some of the things that I had said as a child would hurt you. And then you would have to sort of not show that because, it's just a kid. He doesn't know any better. And I remember just being struck by that and being like, huh. The idea was so foreign that there could be something that I would have done as a child that would have upset you. Or that you had feelings that weren't that you weren't perfect, or the fact that we're all doing the best that we can in any given moment with the cards we've been dealt and the things that we're carrying around. That's been a bit of a revelation. Because I don't think that I'm very unique in the fact that, and this is one of the things I love about somatic experiencing, is it talks about trauma being a vortex, and the vortex sucks you in. And when you're inside the vortex, you can't see anything but that. That becomes the reality, right? So it's like for so long, I only remembered the negative. I only remembered these bad things or these things that like hurt me or that I felt wronged by or that I wish it would have happened in a different way. And it's been nice, for one, to be able to step out of that vortex and be able to remember more good memories or more good times. It's also, for the second part of it, just been amazing to like be like, wow, okay, this is where we're at now. And to be able to appreciate that, and the way that things are continuing to blossom and to grow. And like I said, just to be kind of amazed by your own journey, by your own path. And then, along the way, there's funny things. I mean, you were there when Buddhism came initiating itself into my life. You were there with me in that bookstore that day after Nana died. Yeah. And then I also remember, like, I have this very fond, funny memory of having lunch with you maybe a few months after that, and telling you about some super trashy, like, reality show that I was into called Temptation Island. And you like looking at me and going, is it, can you watch that as a Buddhist? I don't think that's very Buddhist.
And honestly, I don't know if that was making a joke or if I was sincerely asking. I think it was a little bit of both.
Right.
Yeah.
And then I also I think I also appreciate the fact that, that you were accepting of that and curious. And, I remember, not too long after that period, maybe a year after that, going and living with Grandpa, with your dad. Oh, yeah. And, I got taught so many lessons about my own lack of humility, or how I thought that being a Buddhist made me better than my cousins that would come over and talk to him about hunting and fishing and, their redneck shit that they were into. And having these conversations where he and I would find the common ground between Catholicism and Buddhism, or going to see Aunt Ruth with him. And I had my prayer wheel, and she said, well, what is that? And I explained, and she said, oh, it's like you're saying the rosary, and instead of this attitude of, well, I don't understand that, or that's different.
Or you're a pagan.
Right. Like, oh, actually, here's these similarities. And so I've always appreciated that curiosity within you, and that acceptance within you. And yeah, I don't know. It's a great question, right? It's
and I was just thinking too, a second or two ago, as we're talking about some memories and thoughts of how it's moved up to today. But I think that one of the things that we've just touched upon in this time that we spent together now is realizing time's getting short.
Yeah.
And the days dwindle down to a precious few, whether that's 10 precious years or 10 precious minutes.
Right.
They're fewer. Yeah. And so for me, there's quite a bit of there's this beauty and excitement and gratitude, and the poignancy of looking at it where I'm saying, oh, I am so grateful that I've lived to this moment to see this you emerge and to see so many parts of you gelling is the way that I think of it, and to that you're so open about it, and I'm very proud of that because that's not usual for your gender. And at the same time, I'm thinking, I don't have much more time to know you in this way in this life. And selfishly thinking, and I want you to know more about me, because I do know that there's whole swaths of my life that I think if you heard about them or read about them or we talked about it, that you would go, oh, that throws different stuff about me into perspective and about my, my childhood, our home life, and your attitude about this, that, or the other. So there's beauty, and there's beauty in the honesty with which we can say it's not easy to be geographically distant while the aging process is going on. And at the same time, I have to step into my own self, not as the mom, but to say, wow, I sure am grateful that you don't look at me and say, mom shouldn't be getting into, what's she doing? Spending her money going to a Pleiadian seminar. What the hell does she think she's doing? She's 73 years old. She should be thinking about this, that, and the other. You're not putting me in a box.
Yeah, but you know why? You know why? First of all, I mean, and it's something that we talk about on this show a lot, is when people go through an honest transformation, regardless of what they've used, whatever method it is that they're practicing, they don't have to go out and evangelize it.
Yeah.
Even if there's the desire, the draw to go and scream it from the rooftops. To say, have you heard about this? Because I tried this and this worked so well for me. The evidence of the transformation is in the way that you're being.
Yeah.
And people noticing that and going, well, wait a minute. Something's different about you. What have you been doing?
Yeah.
Right? So that's what I see from the work that you're doing, whether it's in the egg, with the Pleiadians, whatever it is. I notice the difference, right? And so who wouldn't be supportive of that? Right? Like I think if you can't open your mind enough to and you have some sort of cognitive dissonance about, well, I see this positive change in this person, but I don't approve of the method that they're using. There's some weird hubris there, or some weird
No, but it goes back to something we were talking about earlier about these are the kinds of things that I, in the role of parent, or you in the role of son of parent who's in their 70s, could be saying, oh my God, is he on drugs? Is she, yes, is she having some kind of Alzheimer's moment? I mean, this is delusional. Should I worry? Should I get her checked out? And that's fear.
Right.
That's the fear.
The fear, exactly. Yeah. Are you going to be open to love or sort of collapse into fear?
Yeah.
Yeah. And also just to say, if it's working for you, whatever it is, beautiful. Just like you were saying earlier, may you find happiness in God in whatever way that you connect with that, right? Who am I to say, not that I do disapprove of anything that you're doing. I think it's wonderful, but who am I to say, no, you don't deserve that happiness. You don't deserve to live a life where you feel actualized and embodied and happy with the way that you're spending your time.
But again, not just the fear, but that I think could come from old resentment, old resentment and old trauma that hadn't been discussed or worked through, coming through, kind of like, what the hell? I went through all this stuff, and she was not dealing with her stuff then, and now she's dealing with it, and she's skipping around having a great old time at 73. How dare she?
I mean, I had that moment a long time ago. I think it was more like they got a pool table after I moved out, What the heck? It's like Sarai asked me, and I'm just going to preface this by saying, like, the last time that we left the physical, being in physical proximity to each other, I found it incredibly difficult. And I don't want to say I'm bracing, but I'm anticipating, I don't want to use the word anticipate because that almost seems like I'm looking forward to it, but I'm foreseeing that there may be some of that tomorrow, that I'm going to feel sad and feel grief. And like you're saying, like, we're being honest about the fact that our time is limited, right? And at the same time, I personally find a lot of resonance with something that Thich Nhat Hanh said when I saw him teach. And I was fortunate enough to get to do that one time. And I've had this about Grandpa before, and I've had this about Nana and Papa, my dad's parents, before, where he said, you may think that they're gone, but look at your hands. They're right there. They're a part of you. They're not separate. And Sarai asked me a few times, in leading up to this trip, she said, have you said everything that you wanted to say to your mom? And I'm like, I don't really know how to answer that, because there's always more to say.
Yeah.
And at the same time, I don't feel like we are waiting until, you're in some sort of transitory, phase or movement. Like, it's not like I'm saving up stuff that, we need to work out or work through. Like, I appreciate that we are in a place where we can just talk.
Yeah, we neither of us has got the gunny sack of crap or the Christmas bag of presents of the, how many people do you hear say, I wish that I had told my father that I loved him, or I wish that I had told him that I was sorry for I did this, that, or the other.
Right.
Nah, we're doing that all the time.
Yeah.
And keeping that current, it doesn't mean that I don't have that pang. One of the things that just helps me is I just think he's still there. He's just not in my sight.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel that with the ones that have departed for me. I don't feel like they're gone. I just can't see them with my physical eyes. But I think that it takes courage on the part of both sides of the equation. It takes courage to have a relationship with you're still my child.
Yeah.
And you're a man. And when I look at you, I see you from that first moment when you looked up at me, and just successive, like a facets of a crystal, just all shimmering madly all at the same time, all wrapped up, and here you are. And I see you at this moment, and it's awe-inspiring, and it's beautiful, and it's very easy for us, any of us, to just in any relationship to just like freeze frame someone.
Right.
Like, I know I'm changing. You're not.
Yeah. I think that's a secret to our success, is that we've been able to move past that.
Yeah.
On both of our parts. And, and it's coming back to me sort of full circle, the Duncan Trussell, sort of the way that we started, because that was one of the most poignant things in the conversation that he had with his mom, as he said, and at the time that they were doing this interview, she had terminal cancer. And he was saying, this is the hardest thing that I've ever had to go through. How do I handle that? How do I deal with those emotions? And she says, you cry.
Yeah.
So it's like, have I said everything that I want to say to you? No. And that's not going to stop me from feeling sad or feeling separation, or, feeling like, gosh, I wish we could have had an extra day together, and it's funny because it's like, we were talking about it earlier. Like, I came home yesterday and, you have that saying of, house guests are like fish, right? After they've been out for a few days, it starts
After
to get
3 days, they begin to smell.
Yeah. And Sarai, Sarai said, wow, you spent like a whole nother day with your mom. I said, yeah. And she said, not everybody could do that. And I choose to appreciate the time that I have here because I know it is limited. I want to soak it up. I don't want to think about the things that I have to do, because those things will be there anyway. It's like, this is a fleeting moment, and I appreciate you indulging me and putting an hour of it onto, recording. And I hope somebody else gets something out of this as well. Just listening to this conversation. I appreciate the time that I've gotten to spend, and appreciate that I can get to a place in my life where I feel good about making that space and can actually appreciate it. I think that's what that was another thing that struck me about the time that I got to spend with your dad as a young man versus being a kid. When we were there as a kid, I just wanted to go play. Mm-hmm. I wanted to go in the barn and run around the fields and play with the animals. And then when I was there in my early 20s, it was like, oh, this time is precious. This time with this person is precious. There's a limited window that I have to actually, do the things that I want to do with them, or ask the questions that I want to ask, or have those conversations, to learn from them. And I appreciated it more. And I actually remember at the time feeling a little bit of regret that, like, gosh, how come I didn't understand that when I was a kid? And then I just sort of forgave myself. Well, because I was a kid.
Because you were a kid and you weren't supposed to have that understanding. And by the way, I don't know if I've ever said this, but I'm so profoundly grateful that you did have that time with Grandpa, because, Grandpa knew you in those few summers. They were really few that you were coming back and forth to the farm. And then suddenly we were still going and you were not.
Right.
And he was the person to whom I turned and vented very frequently my incredible fears about what was going on with you. And one mark of his wisdom was at one point where things were very dangerous for you, and he listened to me because I was just saying, Daddy, I don't know what to do. I'm so frightened. I'm so frightened. And he said, well, I'll tell you what you have to do. You have to get a hold of yourself. because you've got a life to live. You've got 2 other children who need you. And Jonathan is his own human being with his own path and his own destiny. And if his destiny is that his life is going to be a short one, there's nothing that you can do about it. And it was like he had just thrown a bucket of ice water over my head. My father, who'd, up to everything he said to them was, he was so sorry and, such sympathy. This was just like, hey, this is the way that it is. And I don't know that I ever looked back until recently and thought he was preparing himself too, that as a grandfather, he might lose you. And how was he going to deal with it? So for him to go from that and just leap forward into you coming and staying there and being intensely focused on your own spiritual development and trying to understand him, young adult to way older to grandfather adult, before he left the planet. I think it was profoundly healing for him. I think that there was such relief and such joy to see. It was never like he was saying, oh my God, what is this? What is this person doing here? I mean, to me, the mark of it was that the prayer flags were still in the trees. They stayed there until they were rags when he died.
Yeah, I learned a lot from him.
So I guess parting, the thing that I would say is I hope that anybody listening to this in terms of their own relationship with a parent or with an adult offspring, it can be very profound if you accept that there is a place for teaching on both sides and accepting and learning on both sides. It can be very profound, and it's a lot of fun.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we've had a lot of fun this week. So as a way to close, I like to ask people what their vital point is, since the name of the show is The Vital Point. And, the name of the show being The Vital Point came from, you were sharing with me the experience you've had reading the creative, what is it called? The Art of Active Being? The Creative Act? The Creative Act by Rick Rubin, and just opening to a random page and it being there. And so there was a different mushroom ceremony where I had, I have this whole bookshelf of Buddhist books, and this one just started calling to me. It was like reaching out, and I opened it, and out of this, probably 300-400 page book, I opened it right to the actual, the teaching is called The 3 Lines That Strike the Vital Point. Ooh. And so there was something profound in that I had opened it right to the actual teaching. And then the rest of the book was a short commentary, a medium commentary, and a long commentary about these 3 lines. Like the actual teaching is just 3 sentences, right? And I thought, there's an interesting metaphor for a podcast there, because sometimes you ask somebody a question and it might be over in 3 seconds or 3 minutes or 30 minutes. You might be talking about that same thing. And then I took it into the transformation of, David Nichtern would say, handing somebody a recipe isn't going to make them less hungry. Like they've got to cook it for themselves. And so, we can't just have a conversation about meditation. We've got to practice the meditation. We got to do the prayers. We got to do the breath work, whatever it is. So that's become my vital point. But I always like to ask our guests, is there something that's alive to you in this moment as a vital point, or maybe something in your life in this moment that's alive as a vital point that you would share with others?
That's a really interesting question. And I mean, I can think about, a lot of different things that I'm working on and that are working on me and in me. But I think the biggest one is compassion, and in the sense of be kind, because you really don't know what burdens the other person is carrying. Mm. And to find as much as possible the way to carry that into thought, word, and deed. And it starts too with myself, at the end of the day, to like doing the review and what were some things that I did today that were acts of compassion. And a lot of times it's been very interesting for me to think about that StoryWorth topic about what is a small decision that you've made, because I kept coming back to, well, no, decision is like the brain and the intellectual, logical, pro and con, how am I going to make this work, after there's been a thought impulse. That's a decision. And then I thought, no, that's what I call a big decision. When I say small decision, I think it isn't even, it just bypasses that brain. And so often it's just this moment of just stepping forward and doing something that afterward, I think, like I've had some other people say to me, that was so kind that you did X, Y, Z. And I'm just looking at them like, oh, was that? Because it wasn't like today, I must do 5 compassionate things. But that the intention during the day, it's something that's in my morning prayers, that a line that means a lot to me, which is, keep me from insolence in others and from arrogance in myself. Increase my compassion that I have the humility to serve you. I think that's my vital point.
I love that. It reminds me of bodhicitta within the Buddhist concepts, right? It's like on a relative level, treat everyone as if they were your mother with that same kindness. But, you're not approaching kindness and compassion from this place of, I need to go and be compassionate. It's just a state of being. Like this is our natural state, is kindness and compassion. But until we can operate from that ultimate state of being, just behave like as if everyone was your mother, behave with that compassionate in mind, fake it till you make it almost.
Well, along those lines, that is like one of the things that I've been realizing and with great delight in this last couple of weeks is, for a while I was joking around as a newly single person and saying, damn, I need a wife. And then I was realizing, yeah, you know what? I need to be that person, that wife to myself. And then it sort of started expanding where I thought, I need to be the mother to myself. And I need to be the sister to myself. And the friends that I'm looking for and wanting to draw into my life, I need to be that friend to me, and to appreciate myself and take care of myself and ask, darling, what is it that you want? How can I be good to you today? How can we be good for each other? Because then we're going to be better for everybody that we're going to come in contact with.
Some spontaneous internal family systems right there.
Oh, there you go. Or psychosis.
Well, I always say that the mark of a good podcast to me, as I'm recording it, is when I don't want to stop. When I feel like it doesn't matter how long we've been going, we probably could go for another hour easily. And I feel that about this conversation, but I also want to be mindful of the time. It seems like this is a good place to pause, and who knows, maybe we'll get to do another episode in the future. think it turned out better than we thought.
I think so.
All right. Well, I'm going to...
I love you.
I love you too. This has been fun.
What a great episode of the podcast. I'm so grateful to Roberta for her time and sharing her experience, and to you for listening and joining in the energetic connection. Don't forget to head over to school.com/Blue Magic Alchemy to join the community there. There's recorded sessions, live calls, a community message board where you can interact with other practitioners and ask questions, all kinds of cool stuff. Also, if you haven't already, it's currently being redone, but by the time you're listening to this, it might be ready. You can go to bluemagicalchemy.com, the new website, sign up for the email list so that you don't miss anything. And special announcement, I'm only saying it once here at the end of this podcast, so you are the first one to really hear about it, unless you are listening to this out of sequence, and I've already been talking about it in future episodes. But I am starting a newsletter on Substack because I've found that there's so many things going on in the community as far as the school site and the different workshops and classes and podcasts and breathwork offerings and all the things that I'm doing, that I just can't keep up with the emails. So I'm going to start a newsletter that's bluemagicalchemy.substack.com. So go over there and sign up for that. And, keeping with the whole Phoenix theme, when you go there, it'll say that I started that Substack 3 years ago, because 3 years ago I was convinced that someone might take Blue Magic Alchemy. And so I sort of parked myself there and then didn't do anything with it until now. So it's not that you missed out. Time is not linear. Everything's moving at its correct pace. So yeah, stay connected there. And thanks for listening. I hope you enjoyed this podcast. And until next time, remember, regardless of the method you choose, the vital point is to practice. So keep practicing, my friends. See you next time.